Could the most dangerous secret organization controlling our world today have been born from a womb beneath the ruins of Al-Aqsa Mosque 900 years ago? How could 9 knights, who claimed poverty and the protection of pilgrims, spend 9 years in absolute silence, doing nothing but digging deep into the earth? What did they truly find beneath Solomon's temple that made the kings and popes of Europe kneel at their feet, offering both wealth and influence? And was the burning of their leader their end, or the beginning of their transformation into Freemasonry? Hello, and welcome to my small world. I am Dody, and from the bottom of my heart, welcome to the Dody Drama family. Join our big family now. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and let us begin our together into this enchanting world. Let's begin. The Knights Templar and the origin of Freemasonry. The Knights Templar, that is their name, a Christian military and religious organization founded 900 years ago in the heart of the city of Jerusalem. But before we begin, there is a question. Are they truly the origin of Freemasonry, the most famous secret society in the world, which some say controls governments, banks, and the media? The strange thing is that there is evidence linking them together. Freemasonry has a youth organization called the Order of Molay, and this name belongs to the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar. Furthermore, Masonic rituals mention Solomon's temple, which is the exact location that served as the headquarters for the Knights. In fact, there is a famous legend stating that when King Louis XVI of France was executed during the French Revolution 230 years ago, a man rose from the crowd and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Jacques de Molay, thou art avenged." Jacques de Molay was the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, executed by burning 480 years before Louis. So, how could there be someone seeking vengeance for him after all this time? A state within a state and the invention of the banking system. The answer is stranger than you can imagine, because the story of the Knights Templar is not just the story of a religious organization. These men invented the banking system we use today. 800 years ago, you could deposit your money with them in London and withdraw it in Jerusalem using an encrypted letter that no one else could understand. They loaned money to kings and popes, owned an entire naval fleet, and were not subject to any king or government, only directly to the Pope. They were a state within a state, and this is precisely what made them dangerous. The king who decided to destroy them owed them massive sums of money and wanted to erase his debt instead of paying it. The night of arrests and the horrifying charges. On a single day, at the dawn of Friday the 13th of October in the year 1307, every single knight across France was arrested at the exact same moment. But stranger than the arrest itself were the charges. They claimed that the knights denied Christ, spat on the cross, worshipped an idol named Baphomet, and practiced secret rituals in the dark. But were these charges real, or was it a conspiracy? The ultimate mystery beneath Al-Aqsa Mosque. Then there is the ultimate mystery. 9 years, 9 nights. 9 men spent 9 whole years at their headquarters beneath Al-Aqsa Mosque, above the ruins of Solomon's temple. What were they doing? In the year 1867, British archaeologists discovered tunnels beneath Al-Aqsa Mosque that had been dug by the Knights Templar 700 years prior. What were they searching for? And did they find it? Some say, the Holy Grail, the cup from which Christ drank during the Last Supper. Some say, the Ark of the Covenant, the golden chest containing the tablets of the 10 Commandments. Others say, secret documents about Christ himself, and some say, the treasure of King Solomon. But did the Knights truly come to an end? The Knights Templar did not vanish. They still exist in Portugal to this day, but they transformed. And this is what we will discover, the full story of the most dangerous, mysterious organization in Christian history, from beginning to end. If you are listening in the morning, make yourself a cup of tea and lean back. If you are listening at night before bed, don't get too excited. Let's begin. Are the Knights Templar the origin of Freemasonry? Let me give you some baffling pieces of evidence. First, the name. Freemasonry has a very famous youth organization called the Order of Molay. Jacques de Molay is the exact name of the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, the man arrested on that fateful dawn. Why would they name their organization after him if there were no connection? Second, Solomon's Temple. Masonic rituals revolve around one thing: the building of Solomon's Temple. The story of the architect Hiram Abiff, who built the temple, is central to all their rituals. Solomon's Temple is the exact place that served as the headquarters for the Knights Templar. They lived above it, dug beneath it, and took their name from it. Could this be a mere coincidence? Third, the symbols. The Knights use specific geometric symbols in their buildings and seals, and Freemasonry uses very similar symbols: the compass and square, the triangle, the eye, the star. All of them are symbols of building and architecture. Is this another coincidence? Fourth, the most famous legend. In the year 1793, the French Revolution was at its peak. King Louis XVI, a descendant of King Philip, who destroyed the Knights, was sentenced to death. On January 21st, in the Revolution Square in Paris, the guillotine was ready, the crowds were cheering, and the king's head fell. Here, the legend says something bizarre happened. A man from the crowd leaped onto the platform, dipped his hand in the king's blood, raised it high before everyone, and screamed at the top of his voice, "Jacques de Molay, thou art avenged." 480 years lay between the execution of de Molay and the execution of Louis, yet there was someone shouting his name, someone waiting for revenge throughout all these centuries. Who was this man? And why did he know the name of a leader who died 5 centuries ago? Stranger still is the location. Before his execution, Louis XVI was imprisoned in a specific place: the Temple Tower, Tordu Temple, which was the exact main headquarters of the Knights Templar, and the very place where Jacques de Molay was imprisoned 486 years earlier. The king who destroyed the Knights imprisoned their leader in this tower, and his own descendant was imprisoned in the exact same tower before his head was chopped off. Coincidence or retribution? The evidence is vast and puzzling, but is it real? Is there truly a continuous line between the Knights of the 12th century and an organization that appeared in the 18th century? A 400-year gap. How could an organization continue in secret for all this time? We will find out the answer at the end of this video, but the answer is not simple. It is not a mere yes or no. The answer is more complex and stranger than you imagine. To understand the answer, you must understand the full story from the beginning 900 years ago in the city of Jerusalem. Let's begin. Jerusalem, 1099. In the year 1099 AD, success favored the First Crusade. After 4 years of marching, besieging, and fighting, the European armies reached Jerusalem. On July 15th, they breached the walls, and the holy city fell. The holy city, sacred to Muslims, Christians, and Jews, came under Crusader rule. This news spread to all corners of Europe. Churches rang their bells, and people celebrated in the streets. Jerusalem, the city where Christ died and rose again, according to their belief, became Christian, and suddenly, pilgrimage to the Holy Land became possible. Thousands of Christians from France, England, Germany, and Italy began a long journey toward Jerusalem. They wanted to see the places where Christ walked: the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Mount of Olives, the Via Dolorosa. Every pilgrim dreamed of this journey, but there was a major problem: death. The road from the port of Jaffa on the coast to Jerusalem inland was a highway of death. The Crusaders only controlled the major cities: Jerusalem, Jaffa, Acre, and Antioch, but the roads between them were a no man's land. Highwaymen were everywhere. Bandits waited for caravans. Remnants of scattered armies attacked anyone passing by, and Bedouins knew every valley and pass. The pilgrims were easy prey. European Christians who did not know the region, carrying money and jewelry to donate at the holy sites, a perfect target. The Massacre of 1119 AD. In the year 1119 AD, a massacre occurred. A large caravan of pilgrims was on its way from Jaffa to Jerusalem. 300 pilgrims, men, women, and children, were attacked by highwaymen in a narrow valley. No one could escape. Most of them were killed, and 60 others were captured and sold as slaves in the markets of Damascus. 300 people who came to pray died before they could even see Jerusalem. This was not an isolated incident. This happened almost every week. Pilgrims would reach the Holy Land only to die on the road. King Baldwin II, the king of the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem, knew of the problem, but his army was too small to protect all the roads. And he needed help. Here, a man appeared by the name of Hugues de Payens. Hugues de Payens and the New Idea. Hugues de Payens was a French knight from the Champagne region in northeastern France. We do not know much about his early life. Historians believe he was born around 1070 to a noble but not very wealthy family. We know he participated in the First Crusade, saw Jerusalem fall, and saw the blood in the streets. After the victory, he did not return to France like the rest of the knights. Most crusaders returned home after capturing Jerusalem. They did their duty, took their spoils, and left. But Hugues de Payens remained for 20 years in the Holy Land. What was he doing? We do not know exactly, but in the year 1119, 20 years after the fall of Jerusalem, he did something that changed history. Hugues de Payens went to King Baldwin II in his palace, accompanied by 8 other knights, only 9 men in total. The names of some of them have reached us: Godfrey de Saint, Omer, André de Montbard, Payen de Montdidier, and Archambaud de Saint Amand. 9 men stood before the king and proposed something no one had ever heard of before. They said, "We want to be monks and warriors at the same time." The king was astonished. At that time, these were 2 completely separate worlds. A monk lived in a monastery, prayed, fasted, copied books, and never carried a weapon. A knight fought, killed, took spoils, married, and lived a worldly life. No one combined the 2. The idea itself was bizarre. How could a person be a pure monk and a killer at the same time? But Hugues de Payens was persuasive. He said, "We will live the life of monks, taking vows of poverty, so we own nothing personally, chastity, so we do not marry, and obedience, so we obey our leader and the Pope. However, we will fight. We will protect the pilgrims on the roads, and we will defend the Holy Land." King Baldwin thought to himself, "These men want to work for free. They don't want wages, and they don't want land. They only want to serve God. Why should I refuse?" He agreed, and he gave them something even stranger than his approval. He gave them a headquarters. The knights' headquarters in Al-Aqsa Mosque. King Baldwin gave the 9 knights a place to live, and not just any place, the southern wing of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Yes, Al-Aqsa Mosque. At that time, the Crusaders controlled Jerusalem completely. They turned Al-Aqsa Mosque into a royal palace and a church, and they called it Solomon's Temple because they believed it was built upon the ruins of the temple built by King Solomon 2,000 years prior. The first temple destroyed by the Babylonians, and the second temple destroyed by the Romans, and that Al-Aqsa Mosque was built over the exact same spot. The Crusaders thought this was the original Temple of Solomon and gave it to the 9 knights, and from here came the name. The full official name was the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. Latin, Paupers Commilitones Christi Templique Salomonici, or for short, the Knights Templar. 9 men headquartered above the holiest site with the mission of protecting pilgrims. This was the beginning, but pay attention now, because this is where the strangeness truly begins. 9 years of absolute silence. 9 knights tasked with protecting thousands of pilgrims on long, treacherous roads. Think about this logically. The road from Jaffa to Jerusalem was about 60 kilometers, and the road from Acre to Jerusalem was over 150 kilometers. Rough terrains, mountains, valleys, and deserts, with danger at every turn. How could 9 men protect all of this? It was impossible. A single caravan required at least 10 knights for protection, and there were dozens of caravans every week. The math simply does not add up. But that is not the strangest part. The strangest part is this. From the year 1119 to the year 1128, meaning for 9 whole years, there is absolutely no historical record, document, letter, or mention stating that the Knights Templar protected a single pilgrim, not a single caravan, not a single pilgrim, and not a single battle against highwaymen. 9 years of absolute silence. The historian William of Tyre, who wrote the history of the Crusades in meticulous detail, barely mentioned them during this period. He noted that they existed, but what were they doing? Nothing. Total silence. So, what were they actually doing for 9 years? The secret underground. The answer came 750 years later, in the year 1867. Palestine was under Ottoman rule when a team of British archaeologists arrived in Jerusalem with the mission of exploring the Old City. They began digging beneath Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they found something: tunnels. Ancient tunnels, vertical shafts plunging 25 meters underground, which then branched out horizontally in different directions beneath the dome of the rock and its surroundings. And in these tunnels, they found artifacts: a 12th century crusader sword, a spear, a small cross, pieces of armor, a decayed leather shoe, digging tools like hammers and chisels, and the remnants of candles. Items left behind by someone 700 years ago who never returned to retrieve them. The archaeologists finally understood. The Knights Templar were not protecting pilgrims. They were digging. 9 years of excavation beneath the holiest site in Jerusalem, beneath Solomon's temple. The question now is, what were they looking for? What lies beneath the temple? The history of the temple and the Ark of the Covenant. To understand what they were looking for, you must understand the history of this place. Solomon's temple is the sanctuary built by King Solomon, son of David, 3,000 years ago. It is the holiest place for the Israelites, the sole place where sacrifices were permitted. Most importantly, it was the place where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. The Ark of the Covenant is the holy golden chest containing the tablets of the 10 Commandments that God revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai, Aaron's rod, and a small amount of manna. This chest was the holiest object in Judaism, kept in a special chamber at the heart of the temple called the Holy of Holies, which only the high priest could enter, and only once a year. But in the year 587 BC, a catastrophe occurred. The Babylonian army led by Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem. The siege lasted for a year and a half, after which they stormed the city and completely destroyed the temple, tearing it down to its foundations and taking the Israelites as captives to Babylon, the famous Babylonian captivity. However, the Ark of the Covenant vanished. It was not mentioned in the lists of Babylonian spoils, nor was it mentioned anywhere else. It disappeared 2,500 years ago, and no one knows where it is. Theories on the disappearance of the Ark. Where did the Ark of the Covenant go? There are many theories. The first theory, it was destroyed with the temple. The Babylonians burned everything, and since the ark was made of wood overlaid with gold, the wood burned, the gold melted, and it was gone. But this theory is weak. If the Babylonians had found a golden chest, they would have taken it as booty, yet there is no mention of it in their records. The second theory, the priests moved it before the destruction. The priests knew that Babylon was coming, and the siege lasted a year and a half, plenty of time to hide their holiest possession. Perhaps they moved it to a safe place, but where? No one knows. The third theory, Abyssinia, Ethiopia. There is an ancient legend in Ethiopia stating that King Solomon's son with the Queen of Sheba, named Menelik, visited his father in Jerusalem. And when he returned to Abyssinia, he took the Ark of the Covenant with him. The Ethiopian Church claims to this day that the Ark is in their possession inside a small chapel in the city of Aksum. No one is allowed to see it, and a single monk guards it until he dies. Is this true? No one can verify. The fourth theory, and this is the important one before the destruction of the temple. The priests dug secret tunnels beneath it and hid their holiest treasures, the Ark of the Covenant, and perhaps other things like the treasures of King Solomon, sacred documents, or secret knowledge. It remained hidden for 2,500 years until 9 French knights arrived and started digging. Did they find something? No one can answer this question definitively. There is no document saying, "We found the Ark," nor a letter stating, "We discovered a treasure." But there is something incredibly strange. The 9 knights entered their headquarters poor, 9 men with no money, influence, or fame. They spent 9 years in silence with no one paying attention to them, and then suddenly, in the year 1127, everything changed. Hugues de Payens left Jerusalem and traveled to Europe, and doors began to open for him, doors that had once been firmly shut. The journey to Europe and the meeting with Bernard of Clairvaux. Hugues de Payens arrived in France in the year 1127, carrying letters of recommendation from King Baldwin II and the Patriarch of Jerusalem. More importantly, he was carrying something else, though we do not know what it was, perhaps information, perhaps documents, or something he found beneath the temple. We do not know, but the result was clear. His first destination was the most powerful religious figure in Europe, a man named Bernard of Clairvaux. Bernard was a French monk from the Burgundy region, born in the year 1090. At the age of 22, he entered a small, poor monastery called Citeaux along with 30 of his relatives and friends after convincing them to leave the worldly life. Within a few years, he became the most famous monk in Europe and founded dozens of monasteries everywhere. People came from afar to hear his words, kings consulted him, and popes obeyed him. When 2 popes disputed over the seat of Rome, it was Bernard who settled the dispute, declaring, "This is the legitimate pope," and that was the end of the matter. He was more powerful than the pope himself. The strange thing is that one of the original 9 knights, named André de Montbard, was Bernard's maternal uncle, his mother's brother, his direct relative. Was this a coincidence, or was the organization planned from the very beginning? Hugues de Payens met with Bernard, and what transpired between them? We do not know. No document records the dialogue, but the result was staggering. Bernard did not just support the knights, he became their greatest champion. He wrote an entire book about them called In Praise of the New Knighthood, Latin, De Laudi Novi Militiae. In this book, he described the Knights Templar with words he had never used for anyone before. He said they combined the strength of a lion with the gentleness of a lamb, that they were the purest warriors, that their fighting was not a sin but an act of worship, that whoever kills an infidel, according to their terminology, does not kill a human but kills evil itself, and that whoever dies among them in battle goes straight to heaven without judgment or torment. Straight to paradise. This book changed everything. The Council of Troyes in 1129 and special privileges. In the year 1129, in the city of Troyes in northern France, a major church council was held, attended by bishops and religious figures from all over Europe, with Bernard of Clairvaux present in full influence. At this council, the Knights Templar received official recognition from the church. They were no longer a random group of men. They became an official order, ordo in Latin. But not just any order, an order with privileges that no one in history had ever obtained. Let me explain what they received. Exemption from royal authority. A regular knight answered to his feudal lord, who answered to the king. The Knights Templar answered to no one except the Pope directly. No king could command them, and no prince could put them on trial. Tax exemption. They were completely exempt from any tax in all countries and lands. Exemption from tithes. Every Christian paid a tenth of their income to the church, but the knights were exempt. Furthermore, they had the right to collect tithes from others. Building private churches. They could build their own private churches anywhere they wished without permission from the local bishop, and their churches were subject to no one. Granting absolution. The priests within the order could forgive sins, a right that previously belonged only to the Pope and the bishops. Indulgences for donors. Anyone who donated to them received absolution for their sins. This created a massive incentive. If you wanted to enter heaven, all you had to do was donate to the Knights Templar. Do you understand now? These were not just knights. They were a state within a state, an empire within an empire, subject to no one and exempt from everything, and whoever helped them was promised heaven. The inflow of wealth and the establishment of the empire. After the Council of Troyes, the gates of financial heaven literally swung open. Nobles across Europe began donating lands, castles, entire villages, gold, silver, jewelry, horses, and weapons. Anyone who wanted to support the Holy War but could not travel donated to the Knights Templar, and every donation was a step toward heaven. The result? Within just 20 years, the Knights Templar owned real estate in every European country. France, England, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Scotland, Ireland, Hungary, Poland, everywhere. Historians estimate that they owned around 15,000 locations in Europe, including castles, farms, mills, factories, ports, vineyards, and mines, a true economic empire. The invention of the modern banking system. But the smartest part was not just collecting money, but how they used it. The Knights Templar invented something new, something we still use every day to this day, the modern banking system. Let me explain. Imagine you are a pilgrim in the 12th century, wanting to travel from London to Jerusalem. The journey takes months by land and sea, and you need money for food, lodging, ships, and bribes. However, carrying gold and silver with you is suicide. Highwaymen are everywhere, and if they know you are carrying money, you'll be killed. What do? The solution lay with the Knights Templar. You would go to their nearest headquarters in London and deposit your money. They would give you a letter written in a special code that only they could decipher. You would travel without money, carrying only the letter. Even if someone robbed you, they would find nothing and wouldn't understand the letter. When you reached Jerusalem, you would go to their headquarters there, show them the letter, and they would give you your money or whatever you needed from it. This is exactly the concept of traveler's checks and bank transfers 800 years ago, the first international bank. But they didn't stop at transfers. They began lending. Kings who needed money for their wars borrowed from the knights. Popes who needed money for their projects borrowed from the knights. Nobles, merchants, and entire cities. Everyone borrowed from the Knights Templar. However, usury, loans with interest, was forbidden in Christianity. How did they bypass this? Through sheer cleverness. They did not take direct interest. Instead, they charged administrative fees, or they took collateral like land or a castle and exploited it until the debt was paid. The land produced crops, the crops were sold, and the profits went to the knights. It was the same concept, but under a different wrapping, financial intelligence centuries ahead of its time. In their main headquarters in Paris, they kept the treasury of the King of France himself. Yes, the treasury of the French state was in the hands of a private organization. The king deposited with them, and the king borrowed from them. Do you understand now why they were so dangerous? the military doctrine of the Knights. But let us not forget that they were, first and foremost, warriors, and warriors of a unique kind. A Templar Knight trained from childhood in sword fighting, lance combat, horsemanship, archery, and military tactics. But more important than the training was the doctrine. Their rules were clear and written. Never retreat, even if you face 3 times your number. Death in battle against the infidels, according to their naming, is martyrdom that takes you straight to heaven without judgment or torment. Straight to paradise. This doctrine made them invincible. An army that does not fear death cannot be defeated. It can be killed, but it cannot be frightened. Saladin and the Knights Templar. In the year 1187, the decisive Battle of Hattin took place. Saladin, the great Muslim sultan, dealt the Crusader army a crushing defeat, capturing thousands, including the king of Jerusalem himself. After the battle, Saladin did something remarkable. He released most of the prisoners in exchange for a ransom, even releasing the king. However, as for the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, he ordered them all to be executed. He did not spare a single one of them. He did not ask for a ransom even though they were wealthy, nor did he exchange them for Muslim prisoners. He killed them all. Why? Because he knew that these men never surrendered and never retreated. And if he released them, they would fight him tomorrow with the same ferocity and the same faith. Saladin, the greatest Muslim commander of his era, was deeply wary of them, and that tells you everything you need to know about their reputation. 2 centuries of power and the beginning of the fall. From the year 1119 to 1291, a span of nearly 2 centuries, the Knights Templar were at their zenith. An army, a bank, a religious order, and an international network answerable to no one but the Pope. Wealthier than kings and more powerful than armies. At the peak of their might, they numbered around 20,000 knights and servants, a massive, trained, organized army, equipped with the finest weapons and backed by endless financial resources. But in the year 1291, something occurred that shifted the balance of power. The city of Acre fell, the last Crusader stronghold in the Holy Land. The Mamluk army, led by Sultan Ashraf Khalil, besieged the city in a bloody onslaught that lasted for weeks. The Templars defended ferociously and fought almost to the last man, and the Grand Master himself, Guillaume de Beaujeu, was killed in battle. Ultimately, however, the city fell, the Crusaders were completely expelled from the Levant, and after 200 years of warfare, the Crusader dream came to an end. Left without a purpose, the Knights Templar lost their reason for being. They had existed to protect the Holy Land, and now no Holy Land remained under their control. They had existed to protect pilgrims, and now no pilgrims could reach it. They retreated to the island of Cyprus, then dispersed throughout their European headquarters. A massive army without a war, and immense wealth without a clear goal, and more dangerously, numerous enemies lying in wait. The kings who had borrowed from them and could not repay, the bishops who envied their privileges and rival orders that coveted their properties, all were waiting for an opportunity, and that opportunity arrived in the form of a single man, Philip IV. Philip IV and the debt conspiracy. Philip IV was the King of France, nicknamed the Fair, Le Bel, because he was remarkably handsome, tall, blonde, with sharp, striking features. Yet behind that attractive face lay something else entirely: boundless ambition and ruthless cruelty. Philip was obsessed with power. He wanted to be the most powerful king in Europe, stronger than the emperor and stronger than the pope, with no one above him. But he had one major problem: money. Philip's wars against England had depleted his treasury. Wars are expensive. Armies require salaries. Weapons need maintenance. Castles demand fortification, and Philip simply did not have enough. What did he do? In the year 1306, he expelled all the Jews from France and confiscated their money, houses, shops, and everything they owned. Yet it was not enough. He confiscated the wealth of Italian merchants, yet it was not enough. He debased the currency, reducing the amount of gold and silver in the coins so that they held the same nominal face value, but a lower actual worth. This enraged the public, leading to an uprising against him in Paris. The king fled his palace. And where did he hide? In the Paris headquarters of the Knights Templar, right in their stronghold. Yes, the king, fleeing from his angry subjects, sought refuge with the Templars, and the knights protected him, opened their doors, and granted him safety. However, while staying at their headquarters, Philip witnessed something. He saw with his own eyes the sheer scale of their wealth. The vaults, the gold, the documents, and the ledgers, everything was right in front of him. And he remembered one critical thing. He owed them astronomical sums of money that he had borrowed for his wars and could not repay. Suddenly, a simple, brutal, and genius idea struck him. Instead of paying his debts, he would destroy them and take everything, seizing control of the papacy. But there was a major obstacle. The Knights Templar did not answer to him. They answered solely to the Pope. He could not arrest them, put them on trial, or confiscate their wealth, as all of this fell outside his jurisdiction. Therefore, he had to control the Pope first. The Pope at the time was Boniface VIII, a strong, stubborn man who firmly believed that the papacy stood above all kings. Philip wanted to levy taxes on the French church, but Boniface refused. Philip threatened, and in response, Boniface issued a famous papal bull titled Unam Sanctum, in which he declared that every human being on earth, including kings, must submit to the Pope. Philip did not back down. In the year 1303, he sent his men to Italy, led by a man named Guillaume de Nogaret. They stormed the Pope's palace in the town of Anagni, broke into his room, and assaulted him. One of them even slapped the Pope across the face. The 80-year-old Pope was humiliated inside his own palace. The Italian populace revolted and rescued the Pope, but the shock was too severe for him to bear. Just 1 month later, Boniface died. The next Pope, Benedict XI, did not live long. He survived for only 8 months before passing away, and some rumored he was poisoned. The papal seat became vacant, and Philip had many allies within the church. After a year of negotiations and pressure, a new French pope from the Gascony region was elected, Clement V. This man was weak. Philip convinced him to move the papal seat from Rome to the city of Avignon in southern France, right under the king's watchful eye. For the first time in history, the Pope lived in France, under the absolute control of the French monarch. Clement V was a puppet, and now Philip was ready. The Pope was in his pocket, and the next target was clear: the Knights Templar. Fabricating the ready-made charges, Philip could not attack the Knights without a reason. He needed severe accusations that would force the church itself to abandon them. He found a man willing to give him exactly what he wanted: Escudo Florin, a former Knight Templar who had been expelled from the order due to bad conduct. This man went to Philip and provided confessions, stating that during their secret initiation rituals, the Knights forced new recruits to deny Christ 3 times, spit on or next to the cross, and trample upon it. He also claimed that they worshipped an idol named Baphomet, which possessed a terrifying head. Some accounts described it as a cat's head, others as a 3-faced head, and some as a goat's head. He alleged that they gathered secretly at night, and together they formulated 127 charges. Were these charges real? The answer is almost certainly no. These exact same accusations were historically deployed against anyone monarchs wished to destroy. The same charges had been leveled against the Jews before them, and the same would be used against those branded as witches after them. Denying Christ, devil worship, and secret rituals are ready, made blueprint for destruction. Why these specific charges? Because they were horrifying, designed to make the public hate you before ever hearing your defense. And because they were nearly impossible to disprove. How do you prove that you did not worship an idol in secret? How do you prove that you did not spit on the cross inside a locked room? It was impossible. Philip did not need the charges to be true. He only needed them to appear so. And under torture, any human being will confess to anything. Returning to the dawn of Friday, October 13th, 1307 AD. Now we return to that fateful night, but this time with a full understanding of the context. On October 12th, 1307, a royal funeral was held in Paris. Catherine of Courtenay, the wife of the king's brother, had died, and it was a massive state funeral. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, was in attendance, and not only was he present, but he was also one of the pallbearers, a profound honor. King Philip smiled at him, shook his hand, and thanked him for coming. De Molay suspected nothing. Why should he, when the knights had served France for 2 centuries and had protected the king himself from his own people just years prior? There was no reason for concern. That night, de Molay slept at the Templar headquarters, the fortress of the Temple in the heart of Paris. It would be the last night of freedom in his life. The orders had been prepared a month in advance. On September 14th, Philip sent letters to all regional governors across France, sealed documents carrying strict instructions. Do not open until October 12th. For an entire month, the letters sat in the hands of the governors while the knights remained completely oblivious. On October 12th, the letters were opened, and the orders were unmistakable. At the dawn of the 13th, arrest all the Knights Templar in your regions. Confiscate everything, papers, money, weapons, and property. Let no one escape, and anyone who resists shall be killed. At dawn, the pounding on the doors and the storming began. In Paris, the king's soldiers breached the Templar headquarters. Jacques de Molay, now 70 years old, was shaken from his sleep and shackled like a common criminal. At that exact moment, the same scene played out all over France. 1,000 knights found themselves behind bars before the sun had even risen. Methods of torture and confessions. Now began the darkest chapter. Philip required confessions, and confessions are extracted through torture. The French inquisitors were experts in this field, utilizing numerous brutal methods. The rack slashed the wheel. The individual was bound to a large wooden frame or wheel, and their limbs were slowly stretched in opposite directions until the joints dislocated, causing unspeakable agony. Strappado. The reverse hang, the victim's hands were tied behind their back, and they were suspended from a rope attached to their wrists, causing the shoulders to pop out of their sockets. Weights were sometimes added to the feet to intensify the pain. Foot burning. The victim's feet were gradually placed closer to a fire until the skin and flesh became charred. Some knights lost their feet entirely due to this torture. Water torture. Massive quantities of water were poured down the person's throat until their stomach distended, inducing a sensation of drowning and suffocation. Sleep deprivation. Prolonged for days and sometimes weeks. Guards would rouse the prisoner every time they drifted off until their mind completely collapsed. All of this was technically legal, as the church had authorized torture to extract confessions of heresy. The logic was inverted. If you are innocent, God will grant you the strength to endure. If you confess, you are guilty. Yet, it was the law of under this excruciating torment. The knights began to confess, one after the other. 1. Confessions under torture, and the popes stance the land. Yes, I denied Christ. Yes, I spat on the cross. Yes, I kissed the brothers. Yes, I saw the idol. Even Jacques de Molay himself confessed after days of torture, but he noted one thing. I denied with my mouth, not with my heart. I spoke the words under pain, but I never believed them. Following this, the Pope intervened. Pope Clement V, despite being a puppet, was stunned by what had transpired. Philip had acted entirely without his permission, and the Knights Templar answered to the Pope, not the king. Recognizing that Philip had overstepped his authority, Clement sent letters of protest demanding that the trial be transferred to ecclesiastical courts. However, Philip refused to yield. A month later, Clement capitulated and issued a papal bull commanding all monarchs of Europe to arrest the Knights Templar in their respective lands, but doing so in the name of the Pope, not the king's. This provided the official legal shroud, rendering the mass arrests legitimate. 5 years of trials and stakes. 5 years of trials ensued, spanning from 1307 to 1312. 5 long years of interrogations, torture, confessions, and retractions. Initially, many confessed under torture. However, when they were transferred to church courts where torture was less prevalent, a large number retracted their confessions, declaring, "We lied under pain. We are innocent, and the order is pure." In that year, over 600 knights requested to defend the order before the Pope, fully prepared to testify and die for the innocence of their brotherhood. Philip recognized the danger. If their innocence was proven, his entire plot would collapse. The debts would remain, the properties would be restored to them, and he would be exposed as the ultimate enemy. Consequently, he decided to send a message of blood. The Archbishop of Sens, a man fiercely loyal to the king, enacted a new rule. Anyone who retracts their confession is deemed a relapsed heretic, and a relapsed heretic shall be burned at the stake. In May of 1310, 54 knights were burned at the stake in Paris in a single day, right before the public eye. Tied to pillars of fire, the flames were lit, and their screams echoed across the city. The message was unmistakable. Anyone who retracts a confession will burn alive. Following this event, the knights ceased retracting their statements. Fear proved more powerful than honor. 3. Dissolution of the order and fate of the wealth. In the year 1312, at the Council of Vienne, Pope Clement announced his decision. He did not officially find the knights guilty, acknowledging that the evidence was flimsy and the confessions were extracted under torture. Instead, he declared something else. The reputation of the order has been irreparably damaged. Therefore, we dissolve it, not because it is guilty, but because the suspicions surrounding it are too numerous. It was a bizarre piece of logic, but it gave Philip exactly what he wanted. The century-old order was officially brought to an end. In theory, their assets were transferred to the Knights Hospitaller. In practice, however, the monarchs took their share first. Philip seized a vast fortune, effectively wiping out his debts and filling his treasury. He had succeeded, yet one final problem remained: the leadership. What would happen to Jacques de Molay? For the final moment and de Molay's outcry? In March of 1314, after 7 grueling years in prison, the 70th year, old Jacques de Molay was emaciated, frail. His hair stark white, and his body utterly broken by torture, yet his mind remained entirely sharp. Alongside him stood 3 other high-ranking leaders: Geoffroy de Charny, preceptor of Normandy, Hugues de Perraud, visitor general, and Geoffroy de Gonneval, preceptor of Aquitaine. They were brought before a raised platform outside Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, where the cardinals read out their sentence: life imprisonment. Why weren't they burned? Because they had confessed, and a heretic who confesses and repents is not executed, but rather imprisoned for life. The cardinals finished reading and waited for the leaders to accept their sentence in silence, expecting total submission. Instead, something occurred that no one anticipated: the outcry. Jacques de Molay stood upright, raised his head, projected his voice, and shouted, "I am a liar." The crowd fell dead silent as he continued, "I lied. I lied when I confessed. The Knights Templar are innocent, and the order is pure. What I said before was spoken only under the agony of torture. I betrayed my brothers to save myself from pain, but I will betray them no longer." Geoffroy de Charny stood firmly by his side and echoed the exact same words. "We are innocent. We lied under torture." Chaos erupted, and the cardinals had no idea how to react. This was completely unscripted. They transferred the matter directly to King Philip. Upon hearing the news, the king flew into a dark rage. Consulting no one and refusing to wait, he issued the execution order that very same day. De Molay and a Charny were to be burned that night. A heretic who confesses and then recants is a relapsed heretic, and a relapsed heretic is burned without a new trial and without the right to appeal. 5. The night of March 18th and the curse. On the evening of March 18th, 1314, as the sun was setting over Paris, the pyre was prepared on a small island in the Seine River situated between the King's Palace and Notre Dame Cathedral, known as the Island of the Jews, Île des Juifs. A massive pile of firewood surrounded a central wooden stake. Crowds gathered along both banks of the river, thousands arriving to witness the final hour. Jacques de Molay was led from his prison in chains, barefoot, wearing only a simple white smock, the garment of those condemned to death. The guards pushed back the surging crowd as people shouted, some hurling insults and others weeping. De Molay, however, looked at no one. He walked with absolute composure despite his frailty, his 70 years of age, and the 7 long years of torture. He walked like a knight because he was a knight to the very end. Before being bound to the stake, he requested one final wish. He asked to be turned toward Notre Dame Cathedral, toward the Church of the Virgin Mary. The guards agreed. He was tied to the pillar with his hands bound in front of him, yet free enough to pray. His face directed toward the cathedral, toward Christ. The fire was lit, but it was intentionally kept slow. This was designed not just as an execution, but as a final torment. It was a slow, burning fire. The smoke rose first, suffocating and filling the lungs, before the flames touched the feet and crawled upward. The pain was beyond description, yet eyewitnesses recorded something extraordinary. De Molay did not scream in agony. He did not weep, and he did not beg. Instead, he raised his voice to deliver a curse. Amid the roaring fire, smoke, and unbearable pain, De Molay's voice rang out clear and powerful, as though it did not belong to a man burning alive. While historical accounts of his exact words vary slightly, the core meaning remains identical. One account states that he screamed, "Pope Clement, I summon you to appear before the judgment seat of God before 40 days have passed." King Philip, I summon you to appear before the judgment seat of God before this year ends. Another account records, God knows who is mistaken and who is guilty. A terrible fate will soon befall those who have condemned us to death. A third tradition adds, Cursed, cursed be you and your descendants unto the 13th generation. Then, silence fell as the flames swallowed him entirely. 6. The fulfillment of the curse and extinction of the lineage. Was the curse real? Can the words of a dying, burning man alter the destiny of rulers? It is impossible to say for sure, but what followed was profoundly eerie. Pope Clement V, the man who had betrayed the knights, the puppet who had obeyed Philip blindly, died just 33 days later, on April 20th, 1314, following a protracted illness, likely stomach cancer. He died in agony, less than 40 days after de Molay's curse. As for King Philip IV, the Fair, the man who had masterminded the entire conspiracy. He died 7 months later, on November 29, 1314. While out hunting, he suffered a sudden stroke, fell from his horse, and passed away within the exact same year de Molay had cursed him. Yet the curse did not stop there. Philip IV left behind 3 sons, 3 healthy princes, seemingly ensuring that the royal lineage would endure for centuries. But look at what happened next. Louis X became king after his father. He died just a year and a half later without a male heir. Philip V, Louis's brother, then took the throne. He died 6 years later without a male heir. Charles IV, the third brother, became king. He also died 6 years later without a male heir. 3 kings in just 14 years, and all died without leaving surviving sons to inherit the crown. The House of Capet, which had ruled France for over 300 continuous years, collapsed and went extinct in a mere 14 years following the curse of de Molay. Was it mere coincidence? No one can say, but the people of that era firmly believed that Jacques de Molay had exacted vengeance from beyond the grave. 480 years later, the French Revolution and the guillotine of Louis XVI. We now arrive at the connection to the French Revolution in 1793, some 480 years after de Molay was burned at the stake. France was plunged into chaos. The monarchy had collapsed, and the Republic was proclaimed. King Louis XVI, a direct descendant of Philip IV, was condemned to death. Prior to his execution, where was he imprisoned? He was held in the Temple Tower, the very same former headquarters of the Knights Templar, and the exact location where Jacques de Molay had been arrested. It was a chilling historical parallel. On January 21st, at the Place de la Révolution, the guillotine stood ready. Louis XVI was led up to meet his death, and as his head fell, legend says that a highly symbolic event occurred. A man from the crowd leaped onto the platform, dipped his hand directly into the king's blood, flung it toward the heavens, and shouted, "Jacques de Molay, thou art avenged." Did this actually happen? This specific detail cannot be historically verified. The very first person to record it was a man named Charles, Louis Cadet de Gassecourt, who wrote it in 1796, 3 years after the execution. Charles himself was a Freemason who subscribed to conspiracy theories, believing that the French Revolution was secretly orchestrated by the Masons and the Illuminati to dismantle the monarchy and the church. It is highly possible he invented the anecdote to support his own narrative, as no contemporary eyewitness recorded this event at the exact moment it occurred. Nevertheless, the story spread rapidly and became an indelible part of the legend. The question remains, even if it didn't happen, why did people believe it? Why did they want to believe it? Perhaps because deep within the human psyche, there is a profound desire to believe in ultimate justice. To believe that tyrants will never truly escape punishment, even if it takes 480 years. 8. Are the Knights Templar the root of Freemasonry? We now reach the most significant question. Are the Knights Templar truly the origins of Freemasonry? To be perfectly honest, the answer is neither a simple yes nor no. It is far more complex than that. Let us examine the evidence from both perspectives, the arguments for connection and the arguments against it. Arguments for the connection. First, the timing. Modern Freemasonry emerged publicly in the year 1717 in London, roughly 400 years after the dissolution of the Knights Templar. However, a popular theory suggests that the Templars never truly vanished. Rather, some survived, went underground, and established secret societies that endured for 4 centuries before emerging under the guise of Freemasonry. Second, Scotland. When the arrests commenced in France, it is argued that some knights fled northward to Scotland. King Robert the Bruce was excommunicated at the time and did not answer to the Pope, meaning he refused to enforce the papal orders to arrest them. The theory posits that they hid among the medieval stone mason guilds who built the great cathedrals, gradually merging with them and passing down their secrets, a merger from which Freemasonry was allegedly born. Third, symbols. The Knights Templar utilized geometric and architectural symbols, and Freemasonry employs highly similar iconography. The concept of Solomon's Temple is absolutely central to both groups, and architectural tools like the compass and the square are shared symbols. Fourth, Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. There is a small 15th century church named Rosslyn Chapel that is densely carved with mysterious symbols, some appearing Christian, some Masonic, and others linked directly to the Templars. The man who constructed it, William Sinclair, is said to be descended from a Templar knight. Certain theories even claim that the Holy Grail is buried beneath it, a concept famously popularized in the novel The Da Vinci Code. Fifth, Ramsay's Oration. In 1737, a Scottish Freemason named Chevalier Ramsay delivered a highly influential speech in which he asserted that Freemasonry had actually begun with the Crusaders. Although he did not mention the Knights Templar explicitly by name, he forged a firm conceptual link between Masons and the Crusades, laying the groundwork for the theory. Arguments against the connection. First, the historical gap. There is a massive 400-year void, 4 full centuries, between the end of the Templars and the public emergence of Freemasonry. There is absolutely no document, ledger, or physical evidence proving the continuity of the organization during this period. How could a secret society survive for 400 years without leaving a single trace? Second, Ramsay's unsubstantiated speech. Ramsay's famous oration was merely an assertion. He did not cite a single document, record, or historical source to back up his claims. Third, rejection by serious historians. The vast majority of specialized historians, whether focusing on the Templars or the history of Freemasonry, reject the direct link due to the complete lack of documentation. They maintain that Freemasonry evolved naturally from the guilds of operative stonemasons who built medieval cathedrals. These masons traveled from project to project, forming lodges to protect their trade secrets, which over time evolved into philosophical and fraternal societies completely unrelated to the crusading knights. Fourth, the reality of Rosslyn Chapel. Historians point out that the symbols within Rosslyn are not originally Masonic or Templar. The chapel was built 150 years after the end of the Templars, and several of the specific Masonic symbols were actually added during a 19th century restoration conducted by an architect who was himself a Freemason, thereby superimposing modern symbols onto an ancient church. Fifth, the Battle of Bannockburn. The Romantic theory states that Templar knights turned the tide for Robert the Bruce at this famous battle in 1314. However, there is no historical record whatsoever mentioning their presence. The story only surfaced in the 18th century, hundreds of years after the battle took place. 9. A final assessment on the Masonic question. Weighing all the historical evidence. A direct institutional link is highly unlikely due to the total absence of documentation proving the knights fled and founded Freemasonry. A 400-year gap is simply too vast to ignore. However, an indirect connection is entirely plausible. The dramatic story of the Knights Templar was incredibly famous throughout Europe, and the aura of mystery surrounding them, the alleged secrets, the lost treasure, and the fatal curse, was deeply embedded in the cultural imagination. When Freemasonry began constructing its esoteric identity in the 18th century, it naturally borrowed heavily from these captivating tales. They adopted the symbols, embraced the myths, tied their lore to Solomon's Temple, the exact birthplace of the Templars. and even named certain internal degrees and youth organizations after figures like Jacques de Molay. This was done not because they were a literal continuation of the order, but because the narrative was profoundly alluring. After all, who wouldn't want to claim lineage from a mysterious 900-year-old order? Who wouldn't want to inherit the secrets of knights who once excavated beneath the Temple of Solomon? Freemasonry utilized the legend of the Knights Templar to build its own sense of mystique, but that does not make them their true historical descendants. 10. The sole exception, the Order of Christ in Portugal. Before concluding, there remains one extraordinary exception to the rule. Everything regarding the brutal end of the Knights Templar holds true for France, England, and most of Europe, but Portugal was the grand exception. When the Pope ordered the systematic arrest of the knights across Europe, King Denis I of Portugal refused to comply. In Portugal, the Templars were celebrated heroes who had actively helped liberate the country during the Reconquista, building formidable castles and defending the nation's borders. The populace loved them, and King Denis viewed the charges as nothing more than a French political conspiracy. However, unable to openly defy the Pope, he devised an incredibly clever solution. In the year 1319, shortly after the Templars were officially dissolved, King Denis established a brand new organization called the Order of Christ, Ordem de Cristo. It consisted of the exact same knights, the exact same properties, and the exact same castles, rebranded under a completely new name. The new Pope, John XXI, approved the arrangement. Consequently, the Templars in Portugal were never executed, nor was their wealth confiscated. They simply transitioned into the Order of Christ and continued their work. Most fascinating of all, the symbol of the Order of Christ, a distinct red cross on a white background, reappeared in an unexpected place, upon the sails of Portuguese ships during the Age of Discovery. When Vasco da Gama discovered the sea route to India, his ships proudly bore the cross of the Order of Christ. Christopher Columbus, who discovered the New World, was married to the daughter of a Knight of the Order of Christ, and his ships similarly carried their cross. Furthermore, Prince Henry the Navigator, the mastermind who launched the Portuguese Age of Discovery, was himself the Grand Master of the Order of Christ. The spiritual descendants of the Knights who once dug beneath Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem were the very men who mapped the boundaries of the modern world. Astonishingly, the Order of Christ still exists to this day in Portugal. Though it evolved over the centuries into a prestigious meritocratic order of knighthood awarded by the government to individuals for outstanding service, the name and the iconic cross endure. The Knights Templar, who began as just 9 poor men in Jerusalem 9 centuries ago, never truly vanished entirely. A piece of their legacy survived continuously in Portugal, bridging the Crusades straight into the 21st century. 11. Conclusion and moral. Are the Knights Templar the root of Freemasonry? Most likely no, not in a direct sense. However, did their story influence Freemasonry? Yes, absolutely. Did they come to an end in France? Yes, but in Portugal, no. Were their enemies cursed? The Pope died 33 days later, the King died 7 months later, and the royal lineage went extinct after 14 years. Was it a mere coincidence or divine retribution? I do not know, but their story remains that of 9 poor men who started with nothing, built an empire, fell by betrayal, and cursed their enemies while burning alive. Personally, I believe this story teaches us a valuable lesson. No one is immune to falling. The most powerful, wealthiest, and most influential organization can vanish in a single day if the right enemy arrives at the right time with the right accusations. Furthermore, power without a purpose is a danger. The Knights Templar lost their reason for being after the fall of Acre. An army without a war, and wealth without a goal, this is exactly what made them a target. Thank you for watching the Dody Drama channel. I hope you enjoyed the story. Join our big family now. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy this mesmerizing world.